Aimer back with another Mission Impossible review. This time I'm reviewing The Revival, Season 1, Episode 16, which is called The Plague. So this one starts out in Paris at a laboratory where a guy breaks into a secure area, setting off alarms. He steals a petri dish, then walks out somewhat casually in his official uniform. He hands off the package to a glamorous-looking woman in a car, demanding that she end her blackmail now that he's done what she wanted. She puts the petri dish in a container, shoots the man, and then drives away. Jim goes to an aquarium for instructions using the usual spy speak to get the disc player. The mission: we're told that the dead man was actually a general, being blackmailed by Catherine Balzac, who deals in military secrets. The petri dish contains the last known sample of the deadly Xerxes bacteria, which causes rapid aging, and the IMF must recover the sample and put Catherine out of business. No apartment scene here. The IMF gathers in a condemned building in Paris where Grant and Shannon create an audio track with a subliminal message. Jim believes that Balzac is hiding the bacteria in her club called the Red Hand and has arranged a sale with some terrorist groups who are sending their expert to verify that it's the real deal, and the IMF has made a duplicate of one of Catherine's earrings. Max visits the Red Hand, where Shannon is working as a singer, captivating the audience thanks to the subliminal trickery. Catherine's henchman LaRue admires the singing and talks to Max, who tells him that his father is an American colonel who's a member. But Catherine says that the colonel's son is only 15, so Max is brought over to the office, where he gets smacked around by LaRue a bit, and Catherine wants answers about his southern presence. After a while, he says he'll talk, but takes the opportunity to punch LaRue and run out the back door. Catherine's goons are there with their car, waiting, but Max commandeers a motorcycle and leads him through an interesting chase through the narrow Paris streets. He finds Jim at a bridge, who tells him to take off. Max dives into the water, not surfacing. The goons grab Jim as he tries to get away. Max does get out of the water a little ways away, as Grant and Nicholas knock out the bacteria expert and put him on ice. Jim is brought to Balzac's office as an American scientist named Chandler. Jim says he knows all about the bacteria, he claims to have created it, and sent Max to steal it back, which takes Catherine by surprise. Jim shows her pictures of the dead general and also staged pictures of other people near the facility who died from exposure. He figures the seal on the container may be broken and says he knew that the general was a member of the club. Catherine is clearly rattled but plays innocent, telling Jim that his wild theories are just a fantasy. Jim shows her his mangled arm and warns her that anyone who is exposed will suffer greatly, but she's still adamant that she knows nothing and tells him to get lost. Jim says he'll go, but he says he just genuinely wants to destroy the terrible thing he's created and asks her to reconsider. Nicholas gets ready to become the expert, given some equipment by Grant, including a capsule that creates some very nasty-looking lesions when exposed to air. He heads to the club and is brought down to a special lab prepared for him, asking to test the entire stash, but Catherine says he'll have to do with only a small sample for now until she gets paid. Nicholas confirms Jim's story about the plague's origins, and Grant reminds us that there's less than 24 hours left for the plague to start spreading if it's not being contained correctly. Grant guides Nicholas through the process of getting the sample into an IMF container, but he gets distracted and the robotic arm breaks the glass. Grant tells him that he can still do the transfer safely if he acts quickly and carefully, and he manages to get it done. The IMF sends Balzac a painting. Grant gives her a call as an American operative, saying he sent the painting, and tells her to look at it under a blue light. Shannon tries to take the opportunity to switch Catherine's earring while she's on the phone, but LaRue grabs her hand and stops her from touching it. The blue light shows some of the latest satellite schematics from U.S. intelligence, intriguing Catherine. Shannon manages to evade Balzac and LaRue and sneak into her office while she's in the shower, signaling Grant to call her so that she can swap the earring, which Grant explains will also send her subliminal messages and give her symptoms of the bacterial infection. Catherine meets with Grant at a park, offering to trade the full set of plans for the bacteria, indicating that he knows exactly what's going on and urges her to make the swap for her own good, and also that Jim as Chandler is in U.S. custody now. Max and Grant use a grappling hook so that Max can get up on a roof near the club, and Jim calls Catherine saying he's just escaped from custody and needs her help. He tells her it's not safe for him to come to the club right now as it's likely under surveillance. Catherine's cameras spot Max across the way, confirming the story. Catherine asks about the symptoms, and then thanks to Shannon's singing and use of a mixing board, starts to become unstable and anxious, which are some of the symptoms. She and LaRue head down to the lab, where Nicholas has prepared some of Grant's gadgets, showing them what he calls a harmless solution where the bacteria is dormant. The wary pair keep their distance, with LaRue bumping into the testing equipment and the solution spills on the three of them. They wash their hands with water containing Grant's capsule, and the lesions start to form after some moments. Jim arrives at the club, somehow, and Catherine demands that he redo the same procedure he did to himself so that she survives, taking him to the lab. Shannon messes with the lights, and Jim says that they must be in the late stages of exposure, when vision is affected. Nicholas storms out in anguish, and LaRue demands that Jim do something for them. Jim says he'll help them, but only if they hand over everything they've got so that he can destroy it once and for all. Catherine tells him where it's hidden, with Shannon overhearing, and Jim starts going through the motions of developing his cure. Shannon and Nicholas find the bacteria still safe in its container as Jim prepares a syringe with the cure, but says there's only enough for one person. The two of them start fighting over it as a fire breaks out, and they realize that the lesions are fake. Jim gives Catherine a meaningful look as he heads out, hitting the alarm as he leaves and giving us a lame one-liner to end the episode. Mission accomplished. I'm going to give this episode a grade of C, kind of on the border of a C+. It's a decent plot. I would put it right alongside some of the others we've seen already this season, such as The Wall, and many of those that we saw in the later seasons of the original series. There's nothing too fancy in terms of the technique. Just the IMF just finds a way to manipulate the mark and take them through the steps that need to be taken in order to get them to where they want to go. This is a plot that has a lot of cookie-cutter components, and literally they are just taking Catherine through the necessary steps. So it's simple. It's one of those plots, and I mentioned this a fair bit in the original series reviews, that it's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. It does take some, precise planning and whatnot. But there really isn't too much risk to the mission. It doesn't seem to have a very high degree of difficulty. There really is no problem for the IMF other than the brief interlude with the glass breaking, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. What's good about this episode is Maud Adams as Catherine is good. She's a fine actress. I think that the Catherine Balzac character doesn't fully, embrace the three kisses of death as many such villains do. She's a little bit of a schmuck. She exhibits some lameness. It's an earned win, though, for the IMF. She's not too bad as villains go. Visually, this is a pretty neat episode. It looks good. They have that motorcycle chase. Under normal circumstances, that might seem a little bit egregious, but actually here it's not too bad, because I do give the writers credit that they actually made it mean something for the plot. Max just doesn't, ride on a motorcycle for 2 minutes and then just to get away because it looks cool. Sometimes stuff like that has been done. But here it's because he has to go to a place to meet Jim and further the plot so that Catherine's guys can take Jim to her club. Gary Day as LaRue, the henchman, is fine. Nothing special. He doesn't really get too much of an opportunity to do anything other than, do henchman-like stuff. I also think it's kind of good that Jane Badler gets to sing. She is a good singer, and she looks positively radiant in this episode, as usual. Moving on, though, to stuff that is a little bit weird. At one point, the IMF sends a painting to Catherine at her club with the satellite plans in order to kind of lure her to give up the bacteria. And the label or the writing on the package says Madame Balzac. There's certainly no indication that Catherine is married, so it really should say Mademoiselle Balzac, or maybe abbreviated MLLE or something like that. That was a little bit weird. Also, at one point, LaRue refers to the plague as a virus. It's not a virus, it's a bacteria. A show like this should try and be scientifically accurate. Maybe he just slipped up, or maybe it's just a show that he doesn't even really know what exactly it is that they have. Later on, Grant uses the word virulent to describe something that may happen with the bacteria when there's potential exposure to it inside the lab. It is a correct word, actually, to say that bacteria can be virulent, which just means that it's very quickly infectious. But that actually isn't the proper use of the word. Anyway, let's just leave that aside. What I find in this episode that I would qualify as bad is that scene where Nicholas, as the microbiologist, is examining the bacteria. Actually, he's just basically taking the sample and putting it in the IMF container so that they can take it away. He breaks the glass because he gets distracted by a noise outside the lab. But then later, the glass seems to be absolutely fine. In the later scenes, there's no crack. Certainly, Balzac or LaRue would have noticed a crack if it was there. And nobody says anything, but it certainly doesn't look like the crack is there at all. So this is just a plot contrivance for the sake of having something sort of go wrong in the episode, because everything else just goes rat-a-tat-tat and goes completely to plan. So it's one of those where they have to have this kind of fake contrivance. The bigger problem, though, is the fact that this whole scene is contrived. Why didn't Nicholas take a device that had a camera so that Grant could see what he sees, instead of having to have Nicholas describe the lab equipment? Grant has been able to make some very neat gadgets here, and I don't think we've seen it yet, but I definitely know that in future episodes, we are going to see glasses that Grant gives Nicholas to use that do have a camera within them so that information can be relayed. Now, maybe it's a question of distance or something like that, or I don't know. There could have been some kind of hand-wavy argument as to why that wouldn't work, but, still, they could have tried, and if they really, really wanted to, they could have made it work. Other episodes definitely have that. Visually, that sequence is kind of cool to watch Nicholas, manipulate the arm and all that sort of stuff. But it's weird. Nicholas pushes some buttons before he starts moving the arm around. How does he know what buttons to push? Grant doesn't tell him anything, and suddenly here he is pushing buttons in order to get the arm going. Also, once the glass breaks, Grant tells Nicholas that he's got 15 seconds before the sample becomes virulent. That's not how things work. Bacteria doesn't have a 15-second rule. I know sometimes we talk about a 5-second rule when somebody drops food. That doesn't actually make real world sense either. So again, just the whole thing there in a key scene to create suspense for the episode is just so totally contrived. The other thing that I didn't like, towards the end of the episode where, Shannon has swapped Catherine's earring and is using the mixing board to mess with her, by sending signals through that earring. It's messy there because one of the adjustments that she can make on the mixing board is to increase anxiety. And, anxiety is not even really a scientific concept. It's more of a psychological concept. You can't really adjust it, that way. You can't disrupt somebody's balance or equilibrium by using, sound waves and different frequencies and that sort of thing. And that part of it does make sense. But the part where, it's like, oh, let's make her anxious. That was a little bit out there. Anyway, last thing I'll talk about is trying to do a callback to previous episodes. This one at first reminded me of the season 6 episode Nerves, where, the basics of the mission were similar, where somebody had stolen a very dangerous substance and the IMF needed to get it back so that it could be dealt with properly. It is kind of the opposite thing, though, because in that episode, in Nerves, the seal of the substance, which was actually a nerve gas, was actually broken, and there was actually danger to everybody, the entire surrounding community. Here it's kind of the opposite thing, where the IMF isn't sure, but they suspect that the seal could be broken. It actually isn't, but they have to make Catherine believe that it actually is. I think, though, that the better callback is to the season 7 episode TOD5, where the IMF, in that case, they are looking for and trying to take down an organization called the Alpha Group, which is creating a biological weapon. And they have an agent who is, is procuring something through one of his contacts for said weapon. And in that case, they basically have to make the Alpha Group's agent, I believe his name was Gordon Holt, if I remember correctly, they have to make him believe that he's been exposed to the thing that he's looking for and trying to buy. So that forces him to through circumstances, to go and lead them to the Alpha Group's headquarters. He has to basically give up the information to the IMF, or he'll be dead from what it is that he was looking for. I will say, as one final note about this, in that episode in TOD5, one thing that I commented was inaccurate was that the IMF did a similar kind of thing to the Mark, where they made lesion sores appear on his skin to make him believe that he was, infected by this thing that he was trying to buy. But they did that with an injection, which does not make sense. Here, it is at least more plausible because they actually use a substance that's in water that, the Marks use to wash their hands and their arms and that sort of thing. So it does make some sense for the lesions to appear that way. It's a polymer substance that they're actually putting on their hands in order to generate the effect. So at least that was better in this one. I'll give the writers and authors credit for that. And I think that's what I have to say about this one. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. Please like this review video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And please leave your comments about this and other episodes. And I will be back with the next episode, Reprisal, which is a fun one. Go out of your way to go and watch that if you haven't seen it, or if you haven't seen it in a while. And I'll be back with that review very, very soon. And I will see you next time.